part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, here it is, they shall mingle themselves with what? The seed of men. Man's DNA that looks like serpents on a pole wrapped around there. Okay? You're starting to get the picture here. It's the gods, the fourth kingdom, who are going to mingle themselves with the seed of men. We're going to try to join everybody back together again to be this one singular unit God so that we can kick the real God off of His throne and rule over all the planet. And that's what this fourth kingdom represents. We talked about Babylon being an attempt to pull that off, and it didn't work. Greece, an attempt to pull that off, and it didn't work. Rome, an attempt to make it work, and it still doesn't work. You go back to the early 1900s, after World War I. Woodrow Wilson was one of these that led the charge on this. You remember the League of Nations. I always think their emblem was pretty interesting, that of a pentagram. Kind of gives you an idea of what Lucifer said in Isaiah 14, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. That's what the Tower of Babel was all about. I will be like the Most High. And the logo for the League of Nations. The League of Nations was, let's try to get all of the nations, instead of us fighting and scattering ourselves, let's all come together. Woodrow Wilson actually helped form this, President of the United States. And he gave a speech, and this is interesting because when I saw this number, I'm going, yeah, I think this is part of it. Here is a copy of the newspaper, the San Luis Obispo Daily Telegram. Germany asks peace on Wilson's 14 points. See, Woodrow Wilson got up and made a speech on 14 reasons why we need to bring the world together and have all the nations united as one. 14 points. That's the same number that the body of Osiris was scattered all over the earth. And Wilson said, let's try to put him back together. Remember, there's a spirit, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. She actually has made all the kings and all the leaders of the world drunken with the wine of her fornication. And so Mystery Babylon, in the 1900s, trying to bring all of the nations back together as one, called the League of Nations. The League of Nations was a farce. It was a joke. It didn't work. Okay? And so we had World War II. And after World War II, we had the world saying, let's try it again. It didn't work with Babylon, didn't work with Greece, didn't work with Rome, didn't work with the League of Nations. Let's try it again. Maybe it'll work this time. So now we have the United Nations. I want you to look at their logo. Their logo is actually pretty interesting. United Nations represents all of the nations getting together. United Nations Security Council actually claims to have sovereignty over all the members of the United Nations. Whatever the Security Council says, that's what happens. So if the Security Council gets together and says, yeah, let's go to war against Iraq, then the United States and all the nations have to go to get a war. They're all acting or trying to act as one. They're trying to undo what God did. God scattered them. Said you have your own nations here, there, and everywhere. They're all trying to come back together. Look at the logo, the United Nations. I want you to notice that you have, it looks like the world divided up in pieces. Actually, there are 32 of these sections on the globe and the 33rd one in the middle. If you've seen here, Manly Hall, right here. The number 33 is the number for the beast, the Antichrist, the king of the bottomless pit. That's one of his numbers. And so it has everything to do with joining the world together so this guy can be king. But I want you to look at the branches, okay, the laurels that are surrounding the United Nations logo. On the left, you have a laurel with 14 leaves. On the right, you have a laurel with 14 leaves. That represents the scattered body of Osiris. They're trying to put it back together in political unity so that the beast can rule over all the nations of the earth. He's not going to be satisfied until he has them all. You remember, we've talked about this in several videos. Moses and Joshua, when they went into the Promised Land, do you know who they had to fight? They had to fight kings. One of them was Og, a giant, a hybrid. They actually had to fight 33 of these kings to get the land. Are you getting where I'm going? You remember in the days of one of the kings of Israel, Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, joined together with 32 other kings, that's 33, to try to destroy God's people. They are the adversaries. They tried it once, it didn't work. They tried it again, it didn't work. And I'm going to tell you what I think. I think all of the nations of the world are going to try to get together once again so they can beat God up. I'm going to show you at the end of this video that it won't work. There it is, the logo of Freemasonry. It is things joined together as one body, and that number 33, you see the crown also as well. That's that symbol of the United Nations bringing all of the scattered nations together, rebuilding back the political body of Osiris so that he can be king once again. Freemasonry actually has, as part of their logo, I want you to notice the all-seeing eye in the triangle, the Ouroboros, the snake biting its own tail. Let me tell you what Albert Pike says that is. The serpent with its mouth open represents the daughters of men, the female. The serpent's tail represents the 14th missing part of Osiris, his phallus, joining together so they can give birth to a new world order. That's what that's about. And Freemasonry talks about equality, liberty, and fraternity. You know what fraternity is? Everybody is brothers and everybody is joined together. We are all united and consolidated together. Because the goal is that we can't accomplish it alone. We must all get together and have the power of one standing against the evil forces. That's what Masonry says. By the way, let me just throw this in here. I'm going to show you the logo of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Now, I want you to know this, I am not anti-union per se. Everybody's got to work. Everybody's got to have a job, and whether you have a non-union job or union job, it doesn't matter to me. But I want you to think about the focus of most unions, this is throughout the world, is to consolidate all of their workers together so that they can accomplish a goal. And what I would tell you as born-again, Bible-believing Christians, it's okay to have a union job. It's okay to get union money. It's okay to all this stuff. And there's nothing wrong biblically with it. If that's what they're going to do, then fine. You work your job and and feed your family. But you don't always have to go along with everything they say. When they tell you to vote for so-and-so, you don't have to. When they tell you that you have to think a certain way, God gave you an individual brain to think how you want to think. Just keep that in mind. Now, the United Nations meets together not in France, not in Belgium, not in Germany, not in China, not in Tokyo. They meet together in New York City, in the United States of America. Because I want you to think about it. Francis Bacon actually believed that there was a continent. He knew about America, and he believed that America was going to be this continent where this new world order was going to be built. He called it Atlantis Rising. He wrote a little book called Atlantis Rising, and it was about the reemergence of the old world that was buried in the flood. Think of Osiris. And it was going to reemerge in this new continent that was to be called America, later the United States of America. And I want you to just look at history just for a second. When the United States formed, and I love my country, but I see some things here that are starting to make sense. When the United States formed, they started out as 13 original colonies. We mark that on our flag with 13 stripes. Could that represent the 13 pieces of Osiris' body that was put back together in a political structure? Well, what about the missing piece? Well, we had the 13 colonies, but then we had a special designated area that was to be the capital of all of these 13 colonies. It was the 14th part. It was called Washington, District of Columbia. You know what Columbia represents? Columbia is a dove. You know what the dove is the symbol for, guess who? Isis, the goddess, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. That's what the Columbia symbol is all about. So we have a district of Isis that represents the 14th part. And right smack dab in the middle of the District of Columbia is the 14th missing piece of Osiris, his phallus, the obelisk, Washington's monument. You even look on the Great Seal of the United States of America. Look up above the eagle's head. You have 13 stars, and they're joined together as one. You have 13 branches, 13 olive berries. You have 13 arrows banded together as one. If you look on the other side, Anno et coeptus, nobis ordo seclorum. He favors the undertaking or the birth, coeptus, birth, of a new world order. I want you to notice that on this pyramid, 1776, you have 13 rows of stones, and then you have the 14th row separated from the other 13. It's the all-seeing eye of guess who? Horus, who just happens to be the child of Isis and Osiris. By the way, Manly Hall points out that on the Great Seal of the United States, in those 13 rows of stones, guess how many stones you have? 72. So that is just an idea of what you're looking at when you're looking at why are these states, these several states, grouped together under a federal government. It represents joining them together under ISIS. And over time, our government has turned away from the states' rights now to the conglomeration of the federal. The federal now, Washington, D.C. wants to have total control over all of the separated states. She wants to, D.C., her, that spirit. By the way, she has a statue on top of the Capitol building. Okay? That spirit wants to join together all of the separated states into one giant conglomeration of states ruled over by the federal government. That's the spirit of ISIS working together. You get into terminology such as communitarianism. Barack Obama is a communitarianist. What does that mean? It's a first cousin to communism. It basically says in order for our country to be great, and you've heard Obama say things like this, in order for our country to be really, really, really great, what we have to do is we have to have everybody equal. You hear politicians like Barney Frank talk about wage equality. You know what that means? Everybody makes the same amount of money, no matter what they do and no matter how much work they do. Everybody, and they're trying to tell you now that this actually is what works. Communitarianism says that nobody can succeed unless we all succeed together. Have you heard this in the religious realm? The community churches. I'll get to that in a little bit, but the idea behind communitarianism in the church says one Anglican, or I think she was Episcopalian minister in the United States, a woman, actually said, she called it Ubuntu, which Barack Obama has used that phrase before, Ubuntu, which is an African term which means we all get together. Okay, we're all in it together. This concept in the church actually says that no one can be saved unless we are all saved together. You see, I don't think the Bible says that. I think the Bible says that if everybody else in the world is not going to follow God, you can.